the single thing that was most likely to lever people in Citibank's management programs, if somebody asked for a favor, was, has this person done a favor for me?
Hello, fellow daters. My guest today is Bob Cialdini. Bob is the world-renowned psychologist and author. He is his seminal work, Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion, was published 1984, 40 years ago. It's a classic in the field, and it's really one of my top 5 recommended books. In fact, Charlie Munger frequently cited it as one of his all-time favorite business book. Bob, welcome to World of DAS.
Well, thank you, Aaron. I'm glad to be with you and your listeners.
I'm really excited. Now, I'd like to start with like the basics for people maybe who aren't as familiar. There's these 7 kind of principles of persuasion. Can you kind of like you don't have to walk us through all of them, but walk us through some of the ones that maybe people don't appreciate as much and some examples of them?
Sure. I'll try to do that briefly. The first is the principle of reciprocation. People say yes to those they owe. So the implication for us is that if we go first and give benefits or information or advantages, before we sign a contract, before we have an agreement, people are much more inclined to want to say yes to us because we have given first. Second,
when I ride the subway car and some like cult person is trying to give me a flower, they're trying to give me something small to get me like engaged with them. Is
exactly
that the way it works?
Right. I mean, that when that happens and you accept the flower, it's very difficult to give it back. They won't take it back for one thing. Yep. But then I used to watch people in airports fall for this. And they didn't want the flower, they didn't want the book that they were given or whatever. But if they couldn't give it back, they would wind up giving something in return. It's a very powerful principle, exists in all human cultures. You must not take without giving in return. We can leverage that by just being benefactors before we ask. We arrange a circumstance so that we are providing information or some kind of services to people. They stand on the balls of their feet, ready to say yes to us when we have a request or recommendation to all.
Yeah.
Next principle is the principle of scarcity. No surprise that people want more of those things they can have less of. So if we can arrange to show them that what we have is unique or uncommon, rare, or dwindling in availability, it becomes more attractive for it. Right? And
sometimes when I go to the grocery store, I'll see something like the maximum allowed to buy of these is 3. And I would have never even thought to even buy more than 1. But once I see that sign, I kind of want to buy all 3.
That's such a good insight because it's backed up with research. There was a big supermarket firm that did that exactly. They put that little card below the array of a product. They got twice as much response as they have ever gotten.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. If you can't have, that FOMO, fear of missing out, that's what they're leveraging there. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. What's the third one? This is great.
Third is the principle of authority. When we're uncertain, we don't look inside ourselves for answers because all we see is the confusion. We look outside, and one primary place is to authorities, the voices of people who are competent and experienced, knowledgeable on a topic. So if we can show them that we have that authority, or that we have testimonials from people who are acknowledged authorities for what it is that we're saying, we significantly increase the likelihood of our success. There's a nice piece of research that shows, by the way, counter to what a lot of advertising agencies claim, which say, if you've got testimonials, just present your best one, because the other testimonials from other experts will dilute your best argument. Turns out that's not
and the
true.
best one meaning the person with the most authority, or or just like the most powerful
Yes, the
one?
one that sings your praises with the most gusto and eloquence, right?
And what do you think of these, like, 8 out of 10 dentists agree that my product is the best? Like, do you think those are good things or not
Those
so
are
good?
very good things. Research shows, but there's a little caveat there that has to do with your honesty in this. Research shows that if you say 9 out of 10 people who purchase our product report favorable experiences with it, all right?
Yeah.
If you say 90%, you get more positive reaction because you've given something specific rather than just number that you pull out the top of your head or someplace lower, right?
Oh, interesting.
But here's the interesting thing. If you say 89% do, you get the most.
Because it just sounds more believable.
It sounds more
or
believable. You are being
Okay.
not just specific, you are being trustworthy in the presentation of this and the single most effective authority communicator we have ever identified, behavioral scientists around the world, is the credible authority, one that has expertise and trustworthiness. Well,
because nowadays we often doubt authorities, right? Like
yeah,
if we see somebody in a lab coat who's pitching a product or something like that, we think, oh, it's an actor, or even if it's not, even if they're a well-known person, like, oh, they're getting paid
right,
to do it. And
right,
so, how do you know it's like a trusted authority,
right,
or how does one convey
exactly. That's why providing multiple authorities rather than a single one works so well. It's clear that you haven't just picked one. You haven't cherry picked
that?
one.
Cherry picked, yeah.
You've got multiple, and they don't dilute the quality of your best one. Your best one is still there. They reinforce that person's opinion, and you get a sense of a consensus of opinion, and that outdistances a single best one every time.
Okay, that's a third. What's the fourth one?
Fourth
This is
one
great. Let's keep
is
going.
social proof. Again, when you're uncertain, you don't look inside, you look outside. One place you look is to the authority figures, experts. The other place you look is to your peers. What are the people around you like you saying or doing with regard to a particular opportunity? If they're all raving about a new restaurant, or many of them about a new piece of software, well, they've beta tested it for you. You don't have to do it yourself. If a lot of people like you, not just many people, but many comparable people, then you assume, well, then this is going to be right for me. So if you have the evidence of a movement in your direction, of market share, of popularity, you make that prominent. Now, if you don't have that, there's a little approach that works. Let's say you only have 20% of your established customer base to buy your new model, right? The one that you think is better. If you say 20% of our customer base, just like you have, that reduces success because that means 80% have not. But if you use the 20% as the end of a trend, and you say 3 months ago it was 10%, 2 months ago
Now it's
it was 15%, now it's 20%. It's the same 20%, but people project that into the future, and you get significantly more compliance.
I found, like, just selling software, which is what I've traditionally found. Selling enterprise software is just like the most powerful slide is the logo slide of my customers.
Yes.
Here's the list of my customers that are out there. And the hardest thing for me is sometimes you have customers that won't, that say, hey, you can't put me on your logo slide. Yeah. And so let's say Goldman Sachs is your customer, and you really want to tell everyone in the world, because it's such a great customer to have, they don't put you on there. Is there a way to, like, help get your customers to, like, help them get that social proof?
There is, and it goes back to reciprocity. What have you done for them first to make them obligated to you, to make them feel, well, I owe something in return for what I've done, right? You have to You have to reverse engineer that situation.
Yeah.
So that's in place. And then they say, well, okay, all right, what can I do? In fact, there was a
Yeah.
study done by Citibank, and they found that in British-based cultures, the UK, US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the single thing that was most likely to lever people in Citibank's management programs, if somebody asked for a favor, was, has this person done a favor for me?
Yeah.
Then you're just almost helpless. Yeah. Okay. Then it's my turn. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Oh, this is great. Okay, what's the fifth one?
So the fifth one is commitment and consistency. The idea that people want to be and to be seen as consistent with the commitments they have already made, especially in public and especially in your presence. So, for example, there was a study done in Chicago. A restaurateur was having problems with people who were no-showing after making a booking. They wouldn't call ahead. They wouldn't cancel. They just wouldn't appear. It was a big problem.
Yep.
He listened to what his receptionist said, which was, thank you for calling Gordon's Restaurant. Please call if you have to change or cancel your reservation. Right? He asked her, because he had read my book, he asked her to say, will you please call if you have to change?
Or make them say yes or no.
And that's exactly right. Pause. Let them fill that silence with a commitment. And unannounced no-shows dropped by 64% that day and never went back up.
Interesting. When I've been selling software, usually what we do is we kind of like walk with, let's say it's a 3-month sales cycle. We'll kind of walk with them backward and say, okay, look, 3 months from now is kind of like when this thing normally gets sold.
Yeah.
So, okay, that means that 2 months from now, we need to have all this stuff done because you have to bring it to your committee. And that means 1 month from now, we need to have these other things done. And then we kind of walk through, and then we all agree, okay, and they want to get it, they want to get it sold too. So we all work together. We all kind of like sign our name, and that's committing ourselves as well. Like we have to commit to work.
That's right.
To get done, and they're committing themselves to that process.
That's really brilliant because both sides have to commit. Have you ever have somebody back out after you've, here's how.
All the time. Yeah, they back out all the time for sure.
Here's what you can do. Yeah. Send them an email that says, I'm so glad that we have agreed to this. I'm so glad that I've mentioned it to all my staff and all of my friends that we're going to be working together.
Yeah.
And now they're publicly committed to it based on what they've already done. And the more public and here's another thing. If you've ever got a meeting that you're running where you assign people a task to complete by the next week, don't let anybody out of the room until you say, will you? Just like in Gordon's Restaurant. And pause. Let them say, yeah. You significantly increase the likelihood that they will because they're on record. Yeah,
okay. That's great.
Next is liking. No surprise. People prefer to say yes to those they know, to those they like. And, well, how do you get them to like you? Right? 2 things stand out. Similarities, that we have the same taste in whatever, and compliments, genuine compliments that you give them. I used to be a real laggard in this last one. I can't remember. I remember how many times I've been in meetings with graduate students, and I say to myself, well, that was a really smart thing that Aaron just said, and I say it to myself, and I lose all of the well-being that goes with announcing it.
Because it has to be genuine and kind of unique to them, ideally.
All of this has to be genuine. There has to be genuine scarcity. There has to be genuine authority. There has to be genuine social proof. And then nobody loses. Nobody loses. 2 people like each other more now. Right? So similarity.
And it can be Couldn't it be off top? Like, obviously, it could be on topic, like as you mentioned this grad
Yeah.
student, but it could even be off topic, like you like their shoes or something,
Yeah,
and
yes,
like
you could. I mean, as long as it's real, but the
genuine.
more on
Yeah,
topic, the better. The more
yeah,
on topic, or even something like where you give them a reputation to live up to. You say, I really like how you come to the meetings prepared.
prepared. Yeah.
They're
Oh
going to come
yeah. Okay.
prepared to the next one.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
That's a
Uh,
great one.
then the last is a new principle that we've developed called the unity principle, which has to do with the extent to which, let's say it this way, people say yes to those they consider one of them. That is not just similar to them in taste and cuisine or movies or fashion.
So they're
One
kind of
of
like
them.
in the same tribe in a way,
They're
or
in a
they're in their
tribe.
same.
They,
Yeah.
they share an identity, a social identity,
Mm.
right? And all you have to do is when you see that and you raise it to consciousness, they're more likely then to be loyal. People want to follow and favor those who are in their tribes, who are in their categories that they count. I'll give you an example. A study done on a university campus. Researchers took a young woman about college age, dressed like a college student, and had her stand in front of a table for United Way, asking students who were going by to donate. And she was getting some results because she had liking going for them, similarity, right? This about the same
Yeah.
age, about the same clothing. But if in half of the cases she said, "Excuse me, would you donate to the United Way? I'm a student here like you." Donations went up 450%. You
Mm.
don't say no to one of you.
Got it. So you felt like, okay, that's part of my tribe.
Right.
Is there something in a tribe where it's almost like there's something about like, okay, we're together on this thing, but we're also against this other thing. Like part of being in a school at Ohio State is also hating
Michigan,
Michigan
yeah.
or something, right? Like, is there something about like, okay, we also don't like those guys together?
There is. To really solidify the we, there has to be a they that you can distance yourself and distinguish yourself from, and it elevates you and your group, the norms, the values, the beliefs inside that group. It's unfortunate, but that is the case.
And how does one like that? That's one maybe like how does like if you're in a sales motion or some other type of thing, how do you
Use that.
how do you join? How do you figure out what tribe the other person's even in or
Sometimes
something? It's like, oh, we're the engineers and we're kind of fighting against
right.
the management
Sometimes
together.
you can
or
do
something?
that. That's exactly right. I mean, if you're creative, you can find things where you share an identity. I did it with a long-term colleague. Turns out I needed something from him in the same day because I was writing a grant report and it needed to be completed and sent off the next morning. And I had a section of it that was incomplete, really wasn't compelling. But I knew that my colleague in the psych department had done a study that generated the data that I needed, but he hadn't written it up yet. It was still in his archives. So I sent him an email. I said, "Tim, I really need this." I explained it. It's due the next day. I'm going to call you to try to arrange to get the data to me. And this Tim was known as a sour, irascible guy in our place. So I call him up. He says, "Hello, Bob. I know why you're calling." And the answer is no. Look, you're a busy man. I'm a busy man. And I said, "But I have to have it tomorrow." He said, "Bob, I can't be I can't be the correction to your poor time management skills. I'm not responsible for that." And if I hadn't read the research on unity, I would say, "Come on, Tim, I need it. It's do it tomorrow." He had already said no to that.
Yeah.
Here's what I said: "Come on, Tim, I need it. We've been members of the same psychology department now for 12 years. I had the data that afternoon.
Okay. Because that's a very exclusive tribe.
But how many times have we done business with people for long periods of time?
Yep.
As partners, as clients, as co-workers. If we just and we have a request, we would be fools of the influence process if we didn't begin by saying, we've worked together well for the last X. I really wish you could do this for me. That's all. Just bring it to consciousness. Like we're students at the same university. They probably thought this girl standing next to the thing was a student, but until unity was brought to consciousness. Yep. I'm like you. I'm a student here like you. It didn't have an effect.
Now, now that you've seen these practice over many, many years, which of these principles or which of these things do you think is the most misunderstood?
It's the principle of authority. People confuse being in authority with being an authority. Being in authority works
just in your boss or
it's
something.
Your boss. That's power. That's power. It's not persuasion. There's maybe it's even coercion, depending on how the boss approaches you, and so on. People hate that. They resent it. And when the boss can't monitor the behavior, they go around the side of it, or they torpedo it because they resent that. If instead you come on as an authority who has information that will allow them to produce better outcomes in their lives, right? They want to follow that when you're gone. We don't have to be there monitoring them. It's the concept that they were a credible source of information. You believe that information more, and it's the one that has legs. It's the one that produces durable effects.
Now, a lot of people, well, most of our listeners are in like the tech world or data world. What do you think are some examples like tech companies could apply from some of these principles?
If you're enjoying this podcast, please sign up for our newsletter. Go to worldofdas.com. The link is in the description below. Now back to the video.
Apple does it amazingly well. The way that they release their new generations, their new models, like iPhones and so on, and they produce long lines of people outside the door all night in sleeping
scarcity
bags.
Yeah.
You know what that does? It does it gets two principles here. And let me explain it by a true story. There was one of those long lines, I think it was for Apple II or something like that. And people had stayed. And my local TV station sent a reporter to interview those people. What are you doing? Why are you doing this? And by the way, did you have sociable conversations with the people around you, and you built your shared identity as a Apple user? And they said, yeah. And this one woman said, yeah, in fact, I'm number 23 in line right now, but I used to be number 25. And I had a conversation with the woman who was 23, who admired my shoulder bag. It's a $2,800 Louis Vuitton bag. And I said to her, I'll tell you what, my bag for your your place in line.
Oh my gosh, what a story.
All right. Two steps, right?
Yeah.
To her credit, the reporter said, what? Why would you do that? Well, there are two reasons. One is that long line that that Apple created also created social proof. People like me want this thing. The second thing it did was to produce scarcity. And she said to this woman, to the journalist, I heard they didn't have a lot of them at this location, and I didn't want to lose the chance to get one. Scarcity. That combination produced that trade. Mind-boggling.
Now, when I was in high school, it's kind of like pre-internet. I used to wait on these long lines for tickets to
Yeah,
concerts.
yeah,
That's how you would get
yeah,
concerts and come, there's a local place and you would just wait forever. And in fact, in some ways, that's how you got rewarded. You could buy the tickets for $40 and kind of immediately sell them for
yeah.
60 if you wanted to. But nowadays, like these things are like
Right,
online. It's
right.
all, and they're kind of like maybe they're manufactured. Like, how does one kind of think about it now that they're
You
online?
know who does it? Booking.com, which is this company that
Yep.
provides hotel rooms and so on. They found that at first, when they were doing this, they were getting pretty good results. If they added, which you can see now,
Oh, a timer or something.
only 3 rooms left,
Oh, yeah.
and
I always see
6
that. Yeah.
people are looking at them right now.
Mhm.
They did that, and they got and the marketing department got a call from the marketing department called the tech group and said, "There's a problem. We're getting so many requests. There must be a problem with our technology. It must." They said, "No, it just happened that one thing, competition for a scarce and desirable resource."
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay.
I saw,
it's so much of human nature.
yes, I saw an article. They looked at 6,700 online commercial sites, and they did A/B tests. What are the factors that most cause people to jump and go from visitor to customer?
Yeah.
Scarcity, competition for a scarce resource that is limited numbers available was the one that was at the top of the list.
Yep. Now, how does certainly a hotel room makes sense? It's scarce, like or like a limited sneaker
Yeah.
thing, like makes sense. But a lot of things that we buy, Netflix or something like they have unlimited. They could sell unlimited subscriptions to Netflix to you and I, or something like. So how does somebody like that think of it?
They use another one of the scarcity principles. It's not limited number; it's limited time. This is
you have a deal. The deal
this will
is
be
the deal
a
is going to
limited deal,
expire,
or this is scheduled to be off of Netflix this is the last week that it's available on Netflix.
Okay. Yep.
And
They do
they
that for
pile
sure.
in. That's when they get the most juice.
Yeah. Okay. Now, what do you think of this word influencer? Like, that's now a common word, and maybe it means something that you kind of different than when you wrote the book. Like, how do you relate to that?
I'm neutral with regard to it. I don't mind people being influencers, provided they've done it ethically. Provided they've used these 7 principles of influence by pointing to them that are when they are naturally there in the situation. We have a limited number of these, or this is what the authorities say about this brand of cosmetics, or I'm just like you, and I love this lipstick, or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
If that's true, I don't mind it. You're informing people into assent. Okay? We've got a trend. If that's true, you'd be a fool not to use it, because if I'm a customer, I want to know that. I want to put that into the equation of what I decide on this. And it's when they counterfeit that information, when they claim product sales that don't really exist, when they cherry pick a single authority who says something good about, but it's not representative of all the people, when they claim that there's scarcity when there isn't scarcity. Those are the people who I want to spit in their direction, honestly, because they're corrupting
I really like it.
This shortcut that we need in the information overloaded nature of modern life to make good choices quickly.
I really like there's a lot of these like influencers who focus on like very, very, very specific things. Like people are really good at fishing or something like that. And they kind of like talk about why they're good at it, but they also talk about like how to get better at it, or I'm great at guitar or something. And what I like is some of them are very genuine. They may sponsor products, but they sponsor the products they actually use. And you kind of seen them in other videos. They're using this product because they actually really like it. It's not because they got paid later. They probably used it first, and then the sponsor's like, "Oh wow, they really like it." So then I'm going to pay them to kind of promote. That's what I like. But when they're shilling something that like you could tell they don't really even use, then I'm a little.
It's just the
that's
money,
where
not
it kind
the
of doesn't.
favorability. You know, there's a tactic that these people what are these late night TV commercials? What do they call those things?
The infomercials.
Infomercials. You don't see many of them anymore. But the person who was the queen of infomercials once was doing a study where she changed the what she said at the end of a message to, instead of operators are waiting, please call now, to if operators are busy, please call again.
Ooh,
that's good, like never before. And you think about it, if operators are waiting, they're twiddling their thumbs.
Totally, right. Operators are standing by. Yeah, what are they doing? No one's calling. Yeah.
Operators are busy. It means a lot of people like you have decided to do this.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You know, one of the biggest areas like in discussion tech right now are all these like addictive algorithmic feeds that are out there, like on TikTok or on Instagram, et cetera. And they're using all these different kind of persuasive technologies and sometimes manipulating their users. Like, how do you think about that?
You know, again, I'm neutral on it. It depends on whether what they're saying is genuine or whether it's designed to manipulate their preferences without a basis in reality. That's where I draw the line. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. You know, part of the benefit of understanding the principles of persuasion is also to be slightly less susceptible to being manipulated. But by the way, I admit I'm so like ultimately always manipulated by these things, and I feel like I'm falling for them all the time. Like they still manipulate me, but are there ways we can kind of like inoculate ourselves a little bit more to being less likely to being taken advantage of?
Yeah. So I think there are, in fact, in my book Influence, where I have each of these principles, the last section is how to say no. So I talk to people about how to recognize and resist and deflect these principles when you see them being employed in some sort of undue or unwelcome way. But I think the best way to do it, when you might not even be able to recognize that, is check the internet first. Go online. See what product groups are saying about this. See what evaluations see what comments their customers and so on have gotten. And then if they fake that somehow, or you don't know to do that, when you have been deceived, go online and penalize those people.
Write a bad review or those types of things.
We can't allow them to get away with this. Really. They have to be sanctioned. And if they have done things with all respect for ethics and authority and responsibility, compliment them on it, so that they're praised for that kind of behavior when it is the case. And we can be as instrumental on the internet as we are simple recipients of information. We can be the providers of information that shape the reputations of the people we like and dislike.
Now, when you think of like these kind of more well-known scams like the Bernie Madoff or Theranos or FTX or some of these things that, you know, where people are going to jail of, like, what have you learned from kind of like, watching or kind of seeing how these folks operated?
Yeah. The thing that they operated on, I think there were multiple things.
Yeah.
What's surprising is that these weren't just foxes raiding the chicken house. They were fooling other foxes.
Correct.
They were fooling.
Yeah. Rupert Murdoch put $100 million into Theranos.
Right.
Yeah.
And Madoff had investors, had economists, had financial giants investing. It was because he put them in a category of people who he would allow in.
He got them in the club.
And it was scarce. Not everybody was allowed in.
Yep. Yeah, in fact, he'd sometimes threaten that he would kick people out.
Yeah. The FOMO, fear of missing out.
Yep. Yeah, it was interesting. Yeah, if you think of like the board of Theranos, like it was the most well-known as people, George Shultz, like Henry Kissinger, like those types of people. Yeah. Yeah. It really, really. Oh, okay. You've also studied like cult indoctrination. Yeah. Like, what are the parallels there? And I assume there's also some parallels with like the algorithm-driven communities as well.
Well, I know that. There's some parallels, especially with the ideologically based ones, right? Mm-hmm. And the parallel with cults is they degrade all other sources of information except this one, that we have the truth. Everybody else is lying to you, or everybody else is ignorant or stupid. And so this is the one place, and just like the cults, that they don't even let you, once you're in the cult, they don't want you speaking to your former friends or family members. They want no information at all except the information that comes from this source to be seen as credible, right? They disparage and discriminate against those outsiders. Yeah.
Yeah. And essentially like that idea of being the same tribe is times 100.
Yeah. There's a set of academics who did a long set of studies in tribalism, right? This tendency for, and they said, tribalism is human. It's based, I mean, it's deep in there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you think of politics, it's sometimes not even about how much you like your own team. It's really how much you dislike the other team or something.
Exactly. And there's research to support that you would be willing to overlook or dismiss or minimize an ethical violation of a politician who is in your tribe, in your party, right? And what's happened is, this is really regrettable. Factions are superseding facts. Facts don't matter as much as the faction I'm in and the information that's coming from them. What we all believe and prefer to believe. Yeah. I'm worried.
And what is there? Do you think there's like an antidote to that? Or like, obviously people have been talking about this for a long time. It doesn't seem like it's going to stop.
Again, with one individual interaction, you can make a difference. You can, as I say, you can do something for that person first, get them obligated. You can be a listener, a concentrated listener to their position before you ever present yours. And by the rule of reciprocity, if you have listened deeply and asked non-evaluative questions that get them to tell me what you believe and why, when you stop, it's their turn. they'll listen to you in ways that they wouldn't have before.
Now, if you think of an AI, like the first thing I'm sure every AI has done is read your book. And we certainly wouldn't want like the AIs to use it as a tool to manipulate humans and stuff. How I don't know if you've thought about this, but is there a way to like design an AI persuasion system so that it respects human agency?
I have thought about it, and this is really a good insight, because just last week, and I think it was in the proceedings of the National Academy of Science, there was a study that showed that the newest LLMs, GPT-4, for example, understands what deception is, right? It understands deception. And if you include a prompt for Machiavellianism, it will produce a deceptive communication for you. Right? It knows how to do it. So here's the only thing I can think of. We have to fight fire with fire, and we have to design models that detect deception, that we can run that an answer.
Oh, we have our own agents.
Tell me, how manipulative is this? That's where we should be spending our focus.
Like defensive things, essentially. Okay, that would be great. I could run every advertisement through it too. Here's what they're trying to get you to do, or here's how they're trying to get you to do something. One of the things, I think like kids are naturally good at deception. They're naturally good at slightly changing things or putting on puppy eyes to get used to if they want to stay up 30 minutes later or have another ice cream cone or something. It seems like very wired into the average 6-year-old or something. Like, is that just like part of human behavior?
Yeah, it is, because I think they can recognize very early on how much of a sucker we are for our kids. And I'm speaking now as a grandparent.
Yeah.
They can get me to do anything.
Right. It's hard to say no.
Anything.
Yeah.
I mean, and it really upsets their parents who say, no, they can't have everything. No, don't tell them that they can. No, that's not how we're trying to raise them. But I'm lost with that. I actually have some research on this. So I once did a study where I wanted to get the parents of the students in one of my classes to answer a questionnaire, and but how could I do that? I mean, the parents don't get a grade, right? But I said to the students, send this questionnaire to your parents and tell them that if they return it within a week, I will give you 1 bonus point on one of the exams in this class. Right? I had 291 students in the class, and I got 296. I had 296 students, and I got 291 back.
Wow.
Never seen anything
crazy.
Like this. And I said, look, the only way I could increase this would be if I asked them to send these to their grandparents. Then they'd get 295 of the 296.
Right, totally.
Would have had a cardiac arrest running
a coma
to the
or
mailbox.
Something. Yeah. That's crazy. What now? If you think of like a venture capitalist, so I also have a venture capital firm, and we're one of the things that we're sometimes we send entrepreneurs a cold email and we say, hey, we really like your company, we'd love to chat with you. Or we're kind of like we're out there in kind of a sales mode. Of course we think we can help them, and of course we want to give them money, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but still, like, our response rates aren't as high as we'd like them to be. What advice would you have for us?
Give them examples of other companies like them.
Like them in their space, like that they would respect or something.
Right. other family-run businesses, other businesses
Yeah.
with multiple locations in the same city, something
Yeah.
like that, right? And we have had that means we haven't sent you something completely cold. We've recognized who you are, what your situation is, and we have something for you because we've had other businesses like yours respond to us.
Now, how do like naturally occurring like traits in people, like I find there's certain voices that I respond really well to, and even like when you think of podcasting, there's certain voices you're like, oh, and it, or maybe even a certain look or other type. Like how do those things kind of play into it? Maybe it's the likability thing where some of these things play into the likability.
Right. And I'll give you a political example. The two U.S. presidents who were able to do that amazingly well, to get people who didn't know them to respond positively to them, Ronald Reagan and Bill Clinton. They were both seen as Teflon presidents. They had scandals that would just roll off their backs because they would connect with their audiences. They were able to, as communicators, people would say, well, he's talking to me. He really cares about me. That kind of thing, that kind of communicator, that's very effective, right? Also, you were mentioning voice. There's research to show that if you increase the cadence of your voice just a little bit, so not your usual, but one step more faster, right? You seem more confident and truth speaking, right? Because you know this stuff. You're convinced that this is the right thing. So speaking a little bit faster than normal turns out to be a positive.
When I listen to my own podcast, I'll listen to it on regular speed, but then I listen to it on 2x speed, and I'm like, I feel like I'm 10 times smarter at 2x speed than I am at regular speed.
I would recommend 1.5 for most people.
What about like appearance? Like obviously people change their appearance, from simply like dyeing their hair to cosmetic appearance to, facial hair to other types of things. Like how do you think about that?
I don't object to it. I think that people are allowed to look as good as they can in a situation. I mean, would we object to people taking vitamins to have
or working out?
Buying up to date clothing? No, I think that's fine. I don't have a problem there.
And what about in the world that we're living in now? We can change our voice, we could change our actual appearance because on the screen we can do all these other types of things, and maybe you can change it slightly. Like I can get rid of any blemishes on my face, or I could change it drastically as well. And almost like you can be talking to someone who looks completely different than me. Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, I'm not so crazy about that one. That strikes me as using artificial means. It's not really you. It's not really you. And
okay. So there's some sort of line there, like you can, maybe dial it a little bit, but not too much or something.
You've seen these obituaries where people have a picture of them at 21 years old. They've died at 71, but they have a picture of them from when they were on the baseball team in high school or college, or when they were in the army or something. I always have I would much prefer the ones that have a picture of them then and a picture of them now.
Picture now, yeah.
And both are genuine.
Yeah, I find that something, even like if someone's LinkedIn profile, like there was a point actually not that long ago where I had like a LinkedIn profile picture from like 10 years ago. And I'm like, this is just not truthful anymore. I just hadn't updated it. I'm like, I got to update this LinkedIn profile because it's really not who I am anymore.
Yes, I was just at I gave a platform presentation, a big group, and they had a picture of me from a decade ago, right? And what I did was to say, first of all, I want to thank the designer of that poster. Thank you very much, because that's not me. So admitting to it, but having a little bit of self-deprecating humor really goes a long way in getting you. You know, Guy Kawasaki everybody, the evangelist for Apple during Steve Jobs. We were on the same panel, same dais a couple of years ago in Romania, in Bucharest, and he came up to me before. He said, "Bob, I'm gonna use your name in my introduction because I'm gonna have to say positive things about myself, about how Jobs and I created the brand of Apple, and saying positive things about yourself in person makes you lose liking and credibility." Right? So he figured out a way to do it by starting with self-deprecating humor. He got on the stage and he said, "I called my wife last night and I said to her, in your wildest dreams, would you believe that I'd be on the same stage as Harari and Cialdini? In your wildest dreams, would you see me there?" And she said to me, "Guy, you're not in my wildest dreams."
That's a great story.
Everybody laughed and everybody loved him. He had buffered himself from the self-promotional things he had to say because he punctured himself at the beginning with this self-deprecating humor.
And and it's interesting that really, even to this point in the podcast, like we're really just getting to humor. You didn't talk about it as much, like in the front. When people do use it, it is, at least for me, I am so susceptible to it, especially on the liking. I tend to like people who are humorous and stuff. Is that universal? Is that cross cultures?
I think it is. I've seen a study that said if you start an email message with a funny cartoon, people are more likely to accept the message.
Okay.
They're in a good mood, and you've given them something.
Yep. You made them laugh a little bit or chuckle or something. Okay. Now I've seen you tweet before that you don't have any heroes except Charlie Munger. Can you talk a little bit about the relationship you've had with him?
About 25 years ago, I opened an envelope, a legal size envelope that I got in the mail, and there was an A share of Berkshire Hathaway stock from Charlie Munger.
Okay, so even 25 years ago, that was actually worth a lot.
It was $75,000.
Oh my gosh!
And he said, "Your book has made us so much money. By your principle of reciprocation, I owe you." And that was the starting point for our relationship.
Amazing.
And so we would go to, my wife and I would go to the Berkshire Hathaway meetings. We'd have, he had a dinner the night before, not just with us, but 75 other people. And we'd get, and we stayed connected over that time. And I learned a lot from Charlie, just watching him operate in a lot of.
Because one of the things he was so famous for was talking about incentives and in some ways that's related quite a bit to your principles. Like, what have you learned from like his kind of incentives theories?
What he was able to show is that incentives are not just monetary. There are incentives, for example, associated with giving back to others if they have given to you. There's an incentive to do that. Otherwise, you get eliminated. Following the lead of comparable multiple others. There's an incentive for that. You're likely to make a better choice. So all of these things, I think, fit with that larger sense. People do act in their best interests. But it doesn't have to be monetary best interests. It can be psychological, social self-interests as well. Benjamin Franklin said, if you wish to persuade, speak not to argument, speak to self-interest.
Yeah. Interesting. All right, we have two questions we ask all of our audience. First one is, what is a conspiracy theory you believe?
I believe that most politicians are willing to lie to us. And the reason that they do polling and focus groups is to find the lies that we most want to believe. And they'll tell us those.
Okay. I'm not sure how much a conspiracy theory that is, because I feel like most people probably believe that. But it's interesting the way you thought.
They tell us they're doing focus groups for other reasons.
Right.
Than
Okay.
finding the lies we're willing to believe. Yeah.
Got it. And the lie we're willing to believe is X, and so we're gonna and that might move us in some sort of way.
Right.
Okay. And do you think that's nowadays a prerequisite to being a politician is to being able to lie?
Yeah, I'm afraid that although those who are most authentic get more votes for that authenticity. So I think it's wrong-headed in the long term.
But is it one of those things like, well, if you fake sincerity, you haven't made or something?
Exactly right. Yeah.
All right, this has been great. Okay, last question we ask all of our guests. What conventional wisdom or advice do you think is generally bad advice?
One conventional piece of wisdom, or one thing that people typically do with regard to the influence process, is to have a favorite influence appeal, a favorite approach to getting people persuasive.
They have like a specific arrow in the quiver that they use.
That's a mistake. I have a colleague at the University of Florida, marketing professor, who decided that he was going to find the single most effective persuasive appeal, a persuasive approach. What would it be? And I saw him at a conference about 2 years later. He said, "Bob, I found it. The single most effective persuasive approach is not to have a single persuasive approach." That's a fool's game to think that the same way, the same technique is going to work for all populations and all situations, and they're all
and even with the same person, you have to change it up quite a bit or something like that. Okay, this is amazing. Thank you, Bob Cialdini, for joining us on World of DAS. I've been a huge fan of yours for many, many years. Read your book even when I was in college, and such a great. I follow you also at Robert Cialdini on X, formerly Twitter. I definitely encourage our listeners to engage with you there. This has been a ton of fun.
I've enjoyed it, I have to say.
And if you're a super data nerd, go to worldofdas.com. That's DAAS, worldofdas.com, and sign up for our weekly Data as a Service news roundup newsletter.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, consider rating this podcast and leaving a review. For more World of DAS, and DAS is DAAS, you can subscribe on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or anywhere you get your podcasts. And also check out YouTube for videos. You can find me at Twitter at Auren, that's AUREN, Auren, and we'd love to hear from you.